That is so weird. They did the Zoom update a while back, and now this like really ominous woman speaks in your ear now. Recording started, and I'm like, oh, geez,
I
okay,
like it. Let's we're just admitting to robot overlord.
yeah. I
I'm into
mean, might as well lean into it, right?
I mean, absolutely. Alexa runs my house. I've got Alexa, I've got Siri, I've got an Echo. Now I have the Zoom lady, Google Maps lady who loves to yell at me when I take a wrong direction. Yeah, sure. Let's have
I just wish that things like when you're doing Google turn by turn, you could change the voice. Like if I could get Samuel L. Jackson
doesn't that
to
exist? Like you can actually get Samuel L. Jackson now to like
what?
I thought that actually is like a new feature.
Whoa, that's what I need. That's what I need. Either, yeah. Oh
I mean,
God.
I'd much rather have Samuel L. Jackson yell like "wrong turn, motherfucker" than this like passive aggressive lady that reminds me of like my racist aunt going like "you made a wrong turn."
Yeah, make the
Like
next available U-turn. Oh, thanks, Nana. Okay, that's
basically,
so. I always do like a pre thing, like prior to every podcast. So anybody who's listening already knows that I'm here with Laura High, comedian. When did that start for you?
I mean that's I guess it depends on which part you're talking about because I've been into comedy and I've been trying to make people laugh since I was about 3 4 years old, and I always knew at like starting at 4 years old, I have a job in communications. This is fine. That I wanted to make people laugh. That was always what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on stage. I wanted to make people laugh, and that was it. And I instantly went into theater. I started, doing every single show I could possibly do. I went to college and got a degree in theater performance, and I was always cast as like the comedic side role. And I had like my specialty, what I was known for is like my comedic acting. And then I got to New York City. I started auditioning for theater, and I was in a theater production, and one of the audience members was like, "Are you a stand-up comic?" And I'm like, "No, I've never done that in my life." And they're like, "You just read your lines like a stand-up comic." And that kind of got stuck in my head because I always loved stand-up comedy. I always loved stand-up comedy. But I was like, I could never do that. What are you insane? And but it just didn't get out of my head. And I looked around and I found at Caroline's Comedy Club that they have a stand-up course taught by Linda Smith, who still teaches it to this day, and it's called Caroline School of Comedy. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I just go take the course? It's going to be fun, and I'll learn joke structure better, and that's going to help me be a better comedic actress. Perfect. I took it, and I fell in love with it. I was so enamored by the joke writing process. And for our graduation show, we had a graduation show at Caroline's on Broadway. We got to go on the stage and everything. And it was so amazing because I grew up going to Caroline's, going to Comic Strip Live, going to Broadway Comedy Club. So now I get to be on this stage, which was like insane to me. And I was the first one up on the lineup. And right before I got up on stage, I remember forgetting all of my lines, all of my words. And then I got up on stage, I grabbed the mic, and my set came back to me. And it was this instant feeling of, oh shit, I'm home. It was love at first mic. It was the greatest feeling. And I definitely sort of fucked around a bit for a few years because I didn't understand like how much work it took to being a stand-up comic, and I was also given horrible advice from an older veteran comic to not ever do open mics. So that set me behind for a few years, and then once I refigured that one out and I started going to open mics regularly, then I started actually becoming a comic for the first time and was like, "Oh, this takes like daily practice. Oops, didn't realize that. My bad." Um but I would say that I've been doing stand up now for we're probably closing in on 9 years.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. The what do you have any? I guess I would say comics, former or current comics that you can list that were either A, inspiring to you then or even inspiring to you now?
Um, Robin Williams absolutely will always be there. He was Robin Williams Live at the Met was the very first comedy special I ever saw. And actually, it was, my mom watched it when she was 8 months pregnant with me, and she said that she was laughing so much that her tummy vibrated. So it really was the first special I ever watched
In utero.
in utero. Uh, but I watched it again when I was, like, I think in middle school, and I remember just dying over this. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then as I got, let me see what happened. Sarah Silverman kind of entered the picture. Patton Oswalt entered the picture. Eddie Izzard entered the picture. Wanda Sykes. Oh my God. Wanda Sykes,
Oh God.
right? She's if you wanna just see, like, a perfect comedy special, go watch Wanda Sykes' Imma Be Me. I found
Hmm.
that one in college, and I was just like, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen," and I just, like, watched it on a loop. It's absolutely fantastic, but I would say, Ricky Gervais, another one I really got into, and that's also when I really started watching, like, The Daily Show, Colbert Report, which obviously has a lot of stand-up in it, and obviously much later on, Last Week Tonight. And I would say that those shows really inspired me a lot, and my stand-up comedy without even really me knowing it at the time, was that I loved how those shows shined light into dark places, how they were talking and handling about dark subject matter, but they were doing it with a setup punchline format that made it so much more palatable.
Hmm.
And I realized, I was like, why are more people watching The Daily Show and Colbert Report than they are on watching the news? Because they're like, why? Why are they doing that? And it was like, 'cause it's easier to take in. It's nicer to take in. It's easier to take in all this dark subject matter with at least some kind of levity and humanity. And that really kind of got me and touched me a bit, and was like, and that really made me figure out, like, what kind of stand-up I wanna be, is like, I wanna talk about dark things. I wanna talk about the hard shit. I don't want to just talk about, like, "Man, like, shoes are weird." I that classic shoes bit. It's
Yeah.
classic. I'm pretty sure Carson had one.
Yeah. The
Yeah, Carson is another one who was also
mm,
really influential, because I grew up watching, like, Johnny Carson reruns. So
mhm.
for me, I also saw, like, the original, like, George Carlin 5-minute set. I saw the
Oh
original, like,
God.
it's oh, it's fantastic. George Carlin's first 5, God, what else did you can, like, go on and just watch, like, Ellen DeGeneres's first 5-minute set. Go watch Drew Carey's first 5-minute set. Go watch Eddie Murphy's. Go watch, David Letterman's. Go watch Jay Leno's. It's incredible to
Mhm.
watch Joan Crawford's. Not Joan Crawford, sorry, Joan Rivers. Wrong wrong Joan. Wrong Joan. But go watch Joan Rivers' first 5 minutes set. It's incredibly interesting watching their first late night sets.
Mhm.
Um, but watching Johnny Carson in terms of how he handled the crowd, how he essentially handled crowd work, how he interviewed, everything was just really phenomenal, and it's a fantastic lesson on how to host a show.
Mhm.
And
The,
those
uh yeah, God, George Carlin. Oh my God. I remember, as a kid, I know I'm dating myself. I grew up like, in bed at night with my parents watching Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
And really dating myself when I was a kid, I loved Bill Cosby. We're not going to get into the after of that, but yeah, like before he started doing the Cosby Show, because he'd have these specials that he'd put out on audio cassette, and it was really like GPG rated. And I remember having the cassette tapes of those, and putting on the Walkman and playing it, and standing on top of my dresser and pretending I was, right there at the Apollo and doing the whole show. And yeah,
Oh, yeah,
but
I mean, when Cosby was more, I would say, happily in the news. Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody was doing that at 100%.
yeah. And do you think, because this is one of the things that has always fascinated me, and I've listened to a lot of comedians, I've talked to
Mhm.
several, and listened to several podcasts with comedians, and it seems to me there is such a diverse makeup and background of comedians. Like, you're not like, oh, like this type of person's a comedian. Like, you have some people who have like really kind of dark pasts, and then you have some people who are just kind of like, they came up like a normal person. They just kind of have a knack for being funny. I don't know, man. Do you have any kind of input on that or feelings towards it?
I think it's really amazing, and it's one of the things that, and I will say that that is a manifestation of a newer generation of comedy, because that didn't used to be the case. I mean, if you go back to, certainly, like, the '50s, '60s, and also, like, '70s, '80s, and '90s, and then the 2000s, it's all very much one kind of comic. It is one kind of story that's getting pushed out. And that is not the case anymore, especially within this last decade, when I would say that when I entered the scene, sort of the old ways were just starting to die out, and I got really lucky with that. Um, right now, it is so incredibly diverse. It is diverse within types of people, types of backgrounds. You have the amount, it is the most diverse place in my life. And I absolutely love it. And I think that it really shows us that one, comedy is universal. Everybody wants to laugh. You can find comedy no matter where you're from, what you believe, what your gender is, what your race is. It doesn't matter. You can find funny. And it's a universal language. And I think that is so cool and it's so beautiful. And there's something to find funny in everybody's life. Everybody can have a funny perspective. And I think that that's really cool. And I love it. I love how diverse it is. And because I now go to a comedy club, and the I'm trying to figure, like, right now how it is you're not going to hear the same kind of story. It's not really, stand-up comedy is no longer, I would refer to as sort of like a Dangerfield world, where,
Mhm.
every comic is going like, "Oh my god, my wife, kill me," ain't, no respect. It's not that anymore.
Yeah.
You It isn't. Like, I'll go to a show and, oh, okay, so a lineup that I just saw was my fiance was hosting. I mean, my fiance is very much he's more observational. He's a cis straight white guy, and he does really fantastic observational. He does some political stuff, really funny, very nice and very charming, very Pete Holmes-esque. The next comic after him was a fantastic comic. His name is Eagle Wit, and Eagle does a lot of dirty shit. He does, Eagle is, I believe he's mixed race. Um, and his perspective is one of the funniest things you will ever see. If you ever have a chance to go see Eagle Wit perform, I cannot recommend it enough. He is genuinely one of the most funny comedians I've ever seen. And he talks about his background, he talks about how he's a fuckboy, and it is absolutely fantastic. And he will call out white hypocrisy in the in the best way I've ever seen another comic do. And then there was another comic after him who it has a Pakistani background, and he talks about growing up during 9/11. And it was one of the most heart-wrenching and hysterical sets I've ever seen.
Mhm.
So those are 3 completely different sets.
Mhm.
You couldn't find that in the '90s.
Okay.
Those sets wouldn't have been allowed to be on the same show together.
Mhm.
And these are 3 guys who all were like, none of their jokes were at all, there was no overlap. There was nothing. I'm pointing to my wall like I have a whiteboard. There was nothing similar about their sets, except they were all funny, but all being genuine and all telling their story, and they were all giving pieces of themselves.
Mhm.
And they were all being vulnerable, and they were all allowing you to laugh at their circumstances and situation. And it was a killer show. It was amazing. And there was more comedians on it, but those were just, like, kind of the first 3 that I could remember off the top of my head. But, I think that that's something that should be really celebrated within comedy, is that comedy is the most, in my opinion, successful when you allow for every story to be told, because
Mhm.
you never know where it's gonna be found.
Mhm.
You never ever know. One of my favorite comedians, her name is Zarna Garg. She is on TikTok as well. I don't know if you've seen her.
No, no, but I'm Going to now.
Go check out Zarna Garg. Zarna Garg is she's from India. She's a mother of 3. She is now middle-aged, and she is one of the funniest fuckers I've ever seen. She you wouldn't it like, you meet her and you're just like, "Oh my god, like, this is a nice mom, like, she's great." This woman will tear you down with her jokes. It is I mean, it comes out of left field, and she comes out swinging with a hammer, and but her perspective is something I've never heard. It's never something I have heard. It's interesting. It's got such texture and nuance and vulnerability to it, and these are jokes I've never heard before. I've never heard these jokes being told before, and she is just I've never seen her not absolutely destroy and murder the house. I've never seen her even do just okay. Never. And I cannot recommend everybody, yes, please go follow my fiance Dave Colombo, please go follow Eagle Wit, and please go follow Zarna Garg. They are, 3 completely different stories, and they're fabulous to watch.
That's yeah, you nailed it on the head. Just it's like one of my fondest memories, mainly because it took place like a week before we went into COVID lockdown as a nation. So this would have been like, end of February, early March, a couple of years ago. And my wife and I went into Chicago and went to the Laugh Factory. And they had a show that we got tickets for and went into where I think they had 6 different comedians who each had 10 minutes on stage. And it was just one right after another. And it amazed me as the show was progressing that each and every one of these comedians had a different background, had a different look, had a different, I don't want to use the word shtick because that almost sounds dismissive, but just a completely different persona that they were doing. And every single one of them was absolutely hysterical. And that was one of the things that kind of occurred to me. And that's, I think you put it much more eloquently than I could.
I barely stumbled through it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I'll never forget the one comedian who was up there, Maddie Weiner, who, and we listen to this podcast. Now, interestingly enough, I saw her on stage at the Laugh Factory, and then afterwards we ended up becoming friends, and she's been on this podcast, who was just like, oh my gosh. And I try to tell anybody, like, folks, go find her if you can. As a side note, one of the things that I'm interested in, I've never really applied myself to joke writing, but one of the things that I enjoy doing is joke deconstructing, like reverse engineering. I love hearing a joke, or whether it's in a podcast or even if it's on a stand-up on Netflix or something like that, and trying to like get in the head of the comedian and like take the joke back, like where did that so how does that whole process work for you?
I mean, I love also deconstructing a joke. When I hear like a perfect joke, I love going back and going like, why was that joke so perfect? And one of my favorite jokes to deconstruct is, have you ever heard, do you like Patton Oswalt?
Oh, yes.
The sky cake bit.
Yes.
Do you know it?
Yes.
That to me is a perfect bit. That to me is a perfect bit. Another one would be John Mulaney's boss duck story is another perfect bit. But the sky cake bit, for any guys who've never heard it, so Patton Oswalt is he's a very staunch atheist, but I would say he's a very nice staunch atheist. Like he's not a dick about it, but he's very vocal about it. And he talks about the idea that, I get why religion exists. I get why we had it, because everybody was like just raping and murdering each other, and we had to stop getting people to rape and murder each other. So everyone just was like, okay, there's a sky cake. There's a sky cake in the sky. It's the best cake you've ever had. And if you stop raping and pillaging, you get sky cake, okay? You get sky cake. And that's the setup. And it's brilliant. That's exactly what it is. It's brilliant. But then he keeps going, and then he plays the game. Well, if this is true, what else is true? Which to me is always the best game to play when you are doing stand-up, because you keep diving more and more into the world. And so he kept going on and going like, okay, so let's keep going with this metaphor. How does this relate to our current situation? Well, he's like, well, some people didn't believe in sky cake. They believe in sky baklava, sky pie, sky cupcake, sky cookie. And he's like, and we couldn't let people have their sky baklava because people would just be like, no, No, it's sky cake. And the fact that somebody doesn't believe in my sky cake takes away from my sky cake. Sky cake. It's brilliant, and it's a perfect meta it's just it's mwah. I love it. And it's a fabulous because the thing about a perfect joke is that it's simple in nature so that people can see exactly what you're seeing. Sacha Baron Cohen said to me said it perfectly. Everybody can be funny. Everybody can be. But what you have to do is figure out how to get the audience to see exactly what you see.
Mhm.
And so you have to keep the joke simple enough. You have to paint the picture quickly enough and well enough so they're instantly there with you. And then you have small setups and big, giant, dropping punchlines. And then you keep going on it to expand the joke as to then, okay, now if this is true, what else is true? If this is true, what else is true? I believe Eddie Izzard did that with his Death Star video. Well, so the Death Star, it was this like self-containing, essentially planet where everybody worked and that was their job. And so it had to have a cafeteria, right? So imagine Darth Vader going to the cafeteria. And then you keep playing with it. You keep going, okay, well, and you can keep going farther then. You're like, okay, so if there's a cafeteria, then there have to be like dorms. Is there like a Death Star RA? What does the RA do? Does it do like stormtrooper bonding activities? Like, what are the snacks that they bring? I'm curious. And you just keep playing within that world. And that's where you can really sort of figure out the joke structure, how they sort of went about their joke. But there's always but to me, what really makes always a good joke is there's a simplicity to it. There's the writing is always clean, sharp, and it's exactly how many words it has to be. No more, no less.
Mhm.
And then they just dive into the roots and figure out what else is there, what else can I find? And that to me is really where you get the amazing jokes and bits.
There we go. Okay, so you go through this process.
Yes.
There's one thing that's always interested me. You write jokes from that. You put together a set. You get up on stage. How much of comedy is thinking on your toes and reacting to the crowd that you're dealing with? Because I have to imagine it's not like every crowd is a room full of people who are just ready to bust up laughing at a moment's notice. I'm sure there's a lot of diversity there.
Yes. No. Well, it's mixed because it is a lot more. I do think it is a lot more planned out than I think a lot of people realize. I do think that it is. Now, the more and more you do stand up, the more that you're willing to sort of like try on the fly stuff like in the clubs, like during a paid show. But typically it's like if you're doing a paid show, you really want to just do stuff that like is going to work because you want to, make sure everybody has a good time and a good show. But if you wanted to try something new out, like at a paid show, typically the comics will sort of throw those new jokes in the middle.
Mm.
And then they'll always like kind of buffer them in between like, a good opener and good closer. But most of it is very planned out where the comic sits and writes for hours and hours, days and days, weeks and weeks, months and months. And we'll try that stuff out at potentially an open mic or a show that they know is very, very low stakes that they can kind of like, let's just throw this at the wall. Let's see what happens. But when you get into like those real pro comedy club shows, typically those are things that they've done and they have tried and they know that will work. Even crowd work we sort of have like a file cabinet in our head of crowd work. I have bits because I work in New York City most of the time. So typically this is a tourist city. Obviously right now we ain't getting too many tourists at the moment, but typically we do. And like I would do a show where I would have like a family from Australia, a couple from France. I would have a couple of friends from North Dakota, a couple people from Florida, and maybe like a business trip from England. And so I've now developed a giant file cabinet of jokes based off of where you're from. Because it's like, so I've got some Australia jokes ready to go. I have Oregon jokes ready to go. I have Florida jokes ready to go. I have Belgium jokes ready to go. Because they've just been in the audience so many times. You sort of develop that crowd work and you can so it looks like it is on the fly, but we sort of have like this template already in place.
Hmm.
And we sort of have these things where we are in this very similar situations a lot of the times. Um,
Hmm.
but you always need to treat each crowd differently. They're always unique. It's always a conversation. And this crowd is not exactly like your last crowd. So you always have to be sort of fluid in that sense. But it's a lot more like, oh, hey, rowdy guy. I just dealt with like 5 rowdy guys before you. So, yes, haha, we're going to do this a little bit together. What's that? Shut up. All right. Thank you so much. Moving on. And it's like, I've shut down like 5 rowdy guys in the exact same way because I'm like, I know that structure kind of works. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to do this little bit and it's going to feel like it's just for you, but it's not. But, um, and yeah, and it's, so it really varies. It really, really varies. There's no real hard and fast rule, but certainly when you see like a comedy special, everything there is practiced word perfect. Everything is just like, yes, we have this knockdown.
Hmm. The
And
do you I apologize. I hope I didn't cut you off there.
no, 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 no.
Do you first of all, is nervousness something that you deal with at all, or is that something that gets managed over time or disappears over time?
It depends on which show. I mean, there are certainly shows that I was nervous to do in the beginning, but now I'm just like, meh. Now they're just like, whatever. It's a normal Tuesday night now. But there are shows that I'm still just like, oh, I'm about to go headline Caroline's. Yeah, I'm a little nervous right now. I'm gonna
Hmm.
be on stage for 40 minutes. I really fucking hope I don't suck.
Right.
I went and did 4 shows at Comedy Shrine in Aurora, Illinois, right outside Chicago. And they booked me for 45 minutes, which was the most time I've ever done. And it was like I'm headlining not in New York City. Like this isn't like my like yum yum crowd. Like I'm like, I hope to God they like what I do. I don't know anyone here. And that was really nerve-wracking. That was terrifying. Cause I was like, this is my first time headlining on the road. I was really scared. And I'm like, I'm gonna really pretend like I'm gonna know what I'm doing, and we're gonna really just pray and I don't know, like just keep thinking happy thoughts on me. The amount of deodorant I put on for those first shows was
Do you does the size of the crowd impact that at all?
um yes, when the crowd is bigger, it's easier.
Hmm.
If the crowd is smaller, you have way more work.
Yes.
If the crowd is
Yes.
larger, it's typically you feel a little bit better because you're just like, okay, so if I can figure out what gets you guys going, we're gonna be fine. But even with I mean, now I love small crowds. I love late night crowds. That's how I really started doing stand up. Was late nights. Was with late night. Late night is a thing that existed more with clubs, but it's just not really as much of a regular thing anymore. But at Comic Strip Live, what they used to do, on Comic Strip Live was like the oldest club in New York City, is the oldest club in New York City, it's still there, my apologies. And they would have late night where all the new comics would perform 5-minute sets after the main show. So you have people who have now been there for like 2.5 hours who are now watching a bunch of like 20-year-olds do 5-minute sets about their dick because they're all new comics and that's all what 20-year-olds are going to do.
Right.
And like, did you ever see the show Crashing?
No.
There's a great bit where there's like a big hulking guy who just like humps a stool on stage. And I'm like, yes, I know that guy. Like, that's basically what it was. And so that was how I started, was doing late night. So I'm doing late night. I'm doing my 5-minute set 2 years in, and I suck, but I'm doing it for like 2 drunk Aussies who have been there for like 3 hours at this point. So for me, I'm used to working with small crowds, but it is nerve-wracking. When you have a bigger crowd, there is a little bit of like, okay, I just got to figure it out with them. And then once I figure out their button, it's going to be okay. This is going to be fun. But it is nerve-wracking because it is, especially when you do see a large crowd like that. You're just like, this is a lot of people to watch me fail.
Right. That's funny you say that. I have a history of being on stage, not for comedy. Side note, my a lot of my background is actually in history. So a lot of times I would do historical related shows and stuff like that. And I made the interesting observation, and I love the way you said it, is that the bigger the crowd was, the less nervous I was because it just became like a mass. It just became like a mass of people. But when it's becomes intimate,
Mhm.
when it's a smaller crowd, I'll never forget this. This was probably like 5 years ago, and I get this email one time. There was a God, I can't remember the name of it. There was this woman's organization in town that wanted me to come give a lecture on women in the American Civil War. And I'm like, okay. They gave me a date and an address, and they were going to pay me for it. And I'm like, okay, this is a gig I can do. That's all right.
That's cool.
Yeah, when I actually drive to the address, I pull up in front of a ranch house in a residential neighborhood, and I'm like, what in the ass? And I go inside, and it is, I shit you not, it is these sweetest people, these seven little old ladies sitting at a long kitchen table, and they want me to sit at the head of the table and just give this talk.
Oh my god.
And there's doilies, and I'd be looking at my note cards that I had rehearsed, and I'd be like, and then in 1863, the Women Auxiliary Corps, and some little lady would be like, do you want more sugar? Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. So in 18, I hope to God that out of all niceness, that in their elderly age, their smell had started to go, because I know I was just like sweating buckets through that whole thing. I had never been more nervous and
Oh.
more worked up in my whole life. I was so far outside my comfort zone, which is funny because had it been an auditorium with, you know, maybe a
Yeah.
couple hundred, a couple thousand people, it never would have impacted me that way. So that's interesting the way you put it like that.
Well, because that's a completely different structure. I had a
Mhm.
show last year where actually very similar thing. I was told like, "Oh, you're going to do a show for a bunch of like doctors and lawyers in New York City." And I'm like, "Oh, doctors and lawyers in New York City. Fabulous. I can totally do that." And so I'm like going through, I'm like, "This is going to be fine. This is going to be easy. This is going to be fine." So I got my set. I was going to do 30 minutes and I was like, "This will be great." So I get there and it's this giant, and like I'm thinking this must be like a convention or something. I get there and I'm at a brownstone. I'm at like a townhouse and I'm like, "Oh, hi." I walk in and no joke, it looks like the set of The Purge. People are wearing masks. Everything
What?
is painted white. I'm like, "What the fuck? Am I gonna get eaten? Like, this is insane." And I go and they're like, "Oh, yeah," and I go and I'm like, "Hi, I'm here for the night." And just because we wanted to be stereotypical and caricatures, everyone who worked there spoke Russian. And I'm just like, "Oh, sure. This is great." I go up to, and they're like, "Go to the second floor." And I go to the second floor and it looks like an oligarch's like sex dungeon. Like, that's what it looks like. Everything is red velvet from the ceiling to the floor. There's all these weird little LED BOGOs flying around. There's big red velvet plush everywhere. And I'm just like, "Oh." And then I have like the maitre d', and again, he's Russian. So apologies for my horrible Russian accent, but I'm like, "Hi, I'm Laura. So exactly like, what is this?" And he was like, "Oh, you're going to do a show for there's just lots of very important rich people, lots of financial people, very important people, and we're going to be bringing in the supermodels as well." And I'm just like, "Oh my god, what is this?" And I go into the room and it's not a stage, it's literally like a parlor room with like essentially booth seats, so there are people who are going to have their back to me, and I'm like, "This is great." There's no like stage or anything. I'm in the middle of tables in a little itty, and it's just like, fine. And they start bringing in the guests, and it was literally like central casting asked for like it was like a casting call for like who can be the most stereotypical Russian mobster, who can be. And in comes these guys who have fake spray tans, no hair, big dudes, gold chains, open shirts, chest hairs. I mean, it was perfect in many ways. And then the supermodels came in, and I'm just, I mean, supermodels, they were just very lovely escorts. Very, very lovely escorts. And so I came in and I'm gonna like start doing my set, and I'm like, I have no fucking clue how this thing is gonna go. And I walk in, and so I maybe get 2 minutes into my set, and then they bring me a shot, and I'm just like, "Oh, I have to drink this in front of you? You need to make sure I drink your poison? Like, this is great. Is this seasoning? Are you making sure? Am I about to be sacrificed? So I take the shot. It was lovely. And I was like, well, if I'm going, this is how I'm dying. We were just going to accept this. And I remember, like, I'm getting through my set and I'm like, this is just insanity what I'm doing right now. And I'm working like it is. I have to work so hard. And then there's one guy, and he was the most stereotypical looking guy there. I mean, and he's sitting right by the fireplace again, no hair, silk shirt, opened, chest hair, gold chains, spray on tan, body's oiled, big dude. And I'm just like looking at him and I just like don't want to make eye contact with him. And then finally I do. And I'm just like, so sir, what do you do for a living? Why not? And he just looks at me and he's like, I'm a priest. And so then I say, yeah, I'm sure you are, because you look like the guy who has a lot of people praying in front of you saying, don't kill me. And the laugh that got was way too loud and made me very uncomfortable, which was like, apparently, I'm like, this is red flag everywhere, red flags. And then another comic was gonna go up after me. He's a fantastic comic named Ian Lara, and both him and I had the same reaction. We both got there and we were just like, are we about to die? Like, we were like, this is not what we signed up for. Now, he was smarter than me. He looked at me and he was like, you drank the shot? And I was like, they weren't watching me. He was like, I faked it. What are you doing? And I was like, God damn it. But yeah, those weird shows are much harder than like a typical, like, oh, look, there's the stage, go do 20. They are, because it's like you're not doing a normal show. You're sort of just thrown into the lion's den, and you're being expected to be funny under any circumstance. And you really figure out, like, how flexible am I? How funny can I be under pressure?
Right.
Yeah, no, those moments are tough. They are, but they're also fantastic, and they make great stories. And that story I filmed that. I told that story on TikTok, and it did well. It made a good video, which I was excited about. And I'm pretty sure I called my manager afterwards, and I was like, "What the fuck did you book me on, man? Like, that was funny, but still, like, that was concerning."
Yeah. Was it a decent paying gig at least?
It was fine.
Just fine. Not like I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was during like very serious. It was during like that was one of the first gigs I got like after I got vaccinated. So I was like, I will take any money right now. That's fine.
Mhm.
So I was
Yeah.
like, yes, this is worth almost death. Now
Yeah.
I'm like, no, we're doubling my rate for that shit again.
Excuse me. The bizarre thing is, do you ever have these periods doing stand up where you have a show booked and you've worked the show and you know what you're doing, and yet when the day of it comes, you're just like internally just not feeling it. Like it's almost like a forcing yourself, like, okay, I gotta be the funny person. I gotta be the funny person. I'm not feeling like the funny person today. But I mean, is that kind of a thing that you ever have to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I've performed in the middle of like anxiety attacks.
Mhm.
I have an anxiety disorder, and yeah, there are times where I'm just like off stage going, "Hi everybody, how are we doing today? My name is Laura. Where are you from? What do you do? That shirt is weird." And
Mhm.
you're just like, "I'm gonna make it work," and it sucks. There have been times where I've been in the middle of like tears, and I'm going on stage, and that's just like, "Hi, I'm fine. Everything's fine, guys. We're good. Pew 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 pew." And no, that absolutely happens when you are just tired and exhausted and you're just like, I have to entertain. And it's kind of like it's almost you have to fight, I would say, like the Joker urge, where you sort of are just like, I want to watch the world burn. And you just
Mhm.
want to go up on stage and just be like, fuck all of you all right now, and I'm gonna tell you why. You have to sort of fight that urge every once in a while where you just like, I'm gonna go spit some truth.
Gonna drop some truth bombs.
I'm gonna drop some truth bombs on you. I'd say that's what I think a lot of comedians struggle with sometimes, is like they just want to go up. It's fighting the urge to just rant because they have
Mhm.
a really fucking bad day or they're just feeling something, and you're just like, "It's supposed to be funny.
Right.
It's supposed to be jokes."
Don't make the vacationing family from North Carolina feel like
It's not the time to read your manifesto. It's just
Right.
yeah, we always have to remember that it is a job. This isn't just like you're given a mic to like, preach. And you have a job that you are getting paid to do, and you need to do the job. Um,
Mhm.
and I do think that that is something that we as comedians always have to remember and actively remember that let's not traumatize the family from North Dakota today. Let's just not do
Right.
it. It's just not you know what that like because the family, they're sitting there and the parents are feeling cool because they brought their 14-year-old son to the show and they're feeling proud of themselves. They're like, look, we're being cool parents. We're being cool. And you know what? Maybe don't go into your eating asset. Maybe don't do that. Maybe this is not the time to try that bit out. Maybe that isn't because you're just really angry at your girlfriend. Like that's just not a good idea.
Right. Well, part of it probably has to do with the venue too. Like, do you ever, this just occurred to me off the top of my head. Have you ever in that kind of situation where you're in a comedy club that's known for being a nasty comedy club? All
Mhm.
the comedians who are on stage are doing the nasty shit. And yet there's like one person you see in the crowd that you're like, that person's just gonna hate their life after hearing everything I have to say. You know what I
Uh,
mean?
I would say if you're going to like a bar show, you should expect some ass-eating jokes. That you need to absolutely be ready for. If you're going to a comedy club though, and you're going to an 8 o'clock show, chances are you are fine. I think it's more of the time of show. Like if you're doing an 11 o'clock show, once like everybody's like had their drinks, then like, yeah, think you should expect definitely some more of the raunchier material. If you're going to a bar show, you should expect some raunchier material. But it's so funny though, because like I've performed in the South and I go there, and there was one club that was the owners were definitely, I think, more evangelical, and they were like, "We really just like to keep things clean. Please keep your use of the F word to just once per show, and just know that." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, thank you." And the last show, I just kind of was like, "Fuck it," and I did the dirtiest bit in my arsenal just because I wanted to see what happened, and it killed more than anything I had done that entire week because I was like, "You dirty motherfucking Christians. Like, you guys have been
Yeah,
holding up." Like, no, they want the dirty ugh, they want the dirtiest fucking shit.
they do.
Want the dirtiest shit. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, "Oh my god. You kinky motherfuckers." And it's always it's always and I've always found that whenever anybody is just like, "These are conservative crowds." And I'm just like, oh, so you that always to me equals do the dirty shit because always it's the conservative crowds who likes the dirty stuff, and it always happens. It's
Mhm.
never not happened yet, and I'm sure it will at some point, but it's not happened yet. It's the crowds that, like, I think would be really into the dirty stuff who are like, "No, they want, like, surreal, abstract, do your stuff on, like, the Edwardian period." That I'm just like, "Fuck you, Brooklyn, I wanted to do dirty shit."
Yeah. Well, it's kinda like the old line about Americans, right? Puritans in public, but perverts in private, and so,
Yeah.
you can project that all you want, but at the end of the day, yeah, you think it's funny. No doubt.
Yeah, it always happens that way. I'm just like, so yeah, it's always hard to tell, and it's always something where what I was, sort of brought up learning with stand up is don't open dirty, really save your dirty jokes towards the end and sort of throw out some feelers in there to see, like, what you think will land. And if your clean jokes aren't working, maybe then, like, it's just one of those things where every audience is different, and I think that people there no, I can hold on, I can find my words for this one. I think when you're starting out and when you're not a household name, you really need to take some cues from the crowd. But once you do become a household name, then you can go and talk about whatever you want and the audience will come to you.
Mhm.
But like someone like me who's like, I'm a no name. No one, very few people are going to come see me. for a comedy club unless, you know, they are my one of my random TikTok followers, which, you know, I love you guys. You guys are my bread and butter. You guys make my heart go ring a ding ding. And but nobody is gonna know me. So I need to court the audience, as you would. I need to, like, show them, like, "No, I'm not crazy. I'm not, I mean, I am, but, like, I'm not that form of crazy. I need to win you over first, and then we can get into the crazy dirty stuff once we sort of have that trust built up."
Mhm.
Like a couple, very much.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, and folks listening, if you haven't checked out Laura on TikTok, you're doing yourself a disservice. That's actually how I first came across you. That's the whole reason we're having this conversation right now is you had
Let's not
I,
go
I
fucking
it
TikTok.
was the Jesus, if I broke into your house right now and getting out all the water jugs, which
Yes!
for somebody who comes from a Catholic family was just absolutely hysterical. I sent it to every single one of my family members. I'm like, you've got to see this. It's so
Yay!
fucking funny. Um, but one of the things that you've talked about a lot on TikTok is the infertility industry.
Mhm.
So rather than asking a guiding question to get you to where I want to answer, I just want to go, what the fuck is going on? Like for those of us who are completely out of the know, what's happening here?
What, you don't keep up on sperm banks?
No, not since I mean, usually just for conversation, but not in depth.
So, for anybody who doesn't know that side of my material, I'm a sperm donor baby. I was conceived in 1987. I was born in 1988. I was created. I was made, not conceived, like a Toyota, in a clinic from New York City. And I've known that I was donor conceived since I was 14 years old, and as I've gotten older, I've learned more and more about the infertility clinic, I've learned more about my donor conception. I have figured out and I've found out who my donor is. I've so far found 3 donor conceived siblings. Although my donor was donating for at least 6 years during medical school, he is a still practicing OBGYN. Um, yeah, no, that should give you some shivers for a reason. And so he was donating for at least 6 years. I could easily have over 50 siblings. Easily. And the thing that I talk about a lot is the infertility industry is like one of the best kept secrets of the medical industry. It is one of the most unregulated branches of medicine. There are there are shockingly very few regulations. Even people who work in healthcare are shocked when they learn about this because they are like, "We that's impossible though. That's impossible. There's no way that's actually true." And it's really bad. And one of the things that I use my humor and my comedy that I should say at least I attempt to do is bring to light the injustice that happens, talk about the changes that the majority of donor conceived kids would like to see happen, and I talk about my story. I talk about other people's stories who have been very hurt by the infertility industry. And yeah, it's a weird little issue, and it's something where, like, I know the infertility issue and the issues within it are, like, not the number one problem within this world, like, I'm very aware of it, but all the issues are so easily solved, and this is something that is not a bipartisan issue. This is not really a political issue, like, it's very common sense. Any issues that I bring forth with it, it doesn't matter Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Liberal, it doesn't matter, it's all very common sense issues. So, you know, yay, sperm.
Yeah. That's one of the that's just a I mean, you could just say that word and get everybody excited.
Crazy,
Um,
yes. I
why was
mean,
he doing this through medical school? Was it just he needed the money and this was his way to pay for college or
I have no idea. I mean, I've tried reaching out to him, because I really need my medical history, but he will not answer. I'm assuming it must have been for financial reasons. I've done a background check on him, and he's been in financial issues many, many, many times throughout the 90s and early 2000s. So I would not be surprised if he was using the money. Maybe he was paying for medical school. Maybe there was something else happening. I'm not sure, but he definitely does not seem fiscally responsible.
Mhm.
And And that's the reason why most donors do, because they pay very, very well in the United States. Um, and I mean, they pay decently, and especially with there's so many doctors who end up donating because all the clinics go to the doctors and they're like, "Why don't you help out this young couple? It's great, it's easy, you'll have no responsibility, and you just have to jack off into a cup and you make money." I mean, that sounds great.
Hmm.
That sounds amazing. And then they purposely don't tell them about any ethical implications that might happen.
Such as.
So so basically, the only thing that the FDA requires of banks nationally in the United States is an STD test.
That's it.
That's it. That's all the FDA requires. They do not require medical history. They do
What?
not require a psychological background test. They recommend you do all of those things. They do not require it. They do not require verification of any of these things. All they require is an STD test. That's it.
Hmm.
So, so you are donating typically when you are between the ages of like 18 to 30, but like typically the age is like normally like 25, and you are donating and you're filling out your little application. And sometimes the applications are literally just what's your IQ and what's your height. Sometimes they're a little bit more in depth, but nothing is verified. They don't do a check on it. They don't go like, "Hey, can you just supply like a doctor's note to make sure that everything you say is accurate?" Obviously, when you're 25 years old, you're young, you're healthy, nothing is wrong. It's when you get older that medical issues pop up.
Hmm.
And so you are donating anonymously. So as you are getting older, more health issues are popping up. Your donor conceived child has no idea. They don't know
Hmm.
that they need screenings for this. They don't know that all these cancers are popping up. They have no idea. Um, or they don't know maybe that you later in life got diagnosed with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, which has happened to a couple of friends of mine. And they don't they don't leave any way for those donors to contact the donor conceived kids.
Hmm.
So these donor conceived kids are just left in the dark. They donor conceived kids have died needlessly due to the lack of medical information. Also, not to mention, there's no cap. There is no nationwide cap on how many children can come from a donor.
Oh, jeez.
There's no cap. Again, this is common sense. What I'm saying is not, I'm not spouting anything that's crazy. I'm not
Hmm.
saying something that like only blondes can donate. All I'm saying is maybe we should have a cap.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, weird little thought because donor conceived siblings have been matched on Tinder
Guy. Hmm.
because we don't know who our siblings are.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
We don't know. And they have I recently had an interview with somebody who used to work in like outreach and marketing for a clinic in 2013 and 14. And one of their donors maxed out, meaning that they had 50 confirmed live births in the United States and 75 confirmed overseas. She took this to her higher ups and she presented this and was like, "We have to stop using this donor." That donor happened to be their most popular donor. Whenever any of his sperm came in, it sold out within a week. And the owner of the clinic, her boss, whomever, was like, "Nope, he's our most popular and there's no regulation against it. So we're going to keep using it." I mean, technically, what they're doing is legal, is the thing. Like, it's
Hmm.
all legal, but it's insanely unethical. It's
Yeah.
incredibly unethical. The parents don't know any of this. The parents are assuming, like, it must be just like they have no idea. And the kids don't know. And obviously, if all of your sperm, like, hypothetically, is in, like, New York City, chances are most of the kids are also going to be in New York City. Now, sometimes
Hmm.
sperm is shipped to other states, to other countries. Sometimes the donor doesn't even realize that, but most of it typically stays within the same area. There's another donor who I've spoken to, his lawyer, who his natural born kids went to the same school as his donor conceived kids. They had no idea. They were in the same class.
Whoa. Wow. Especially if you move forward, like generationally speaking, you know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like, yeah, like let's say it's 150 kids. Each of those 150 kids has two kids. Each of their kids has two kids. You know, you move down the line and you're like, oh my God, eventually, like, that's just New York City now is this guy's one gene pool. I never, it always made me, I didn't know any of this prior to you. I do remember being in my early 20s and some friends were talking, you know, and of course, like most people, when you're in your early 20s, you're financially like, good Lord, I'd do anything for 20 bucks right now. It's
Oh.
just, you know, and I remember some friends talking like, hey, you know, if we, there's a sperm bank over there. And if you go there, you know, I mean, you're going to do it anyway tonight. So you might as well get paid for it, you know? And I have to admit, like the whole idea of it made me insanely uncomfortable purely just because the last thing I wanted in my life was 20 years from now, some kid shows up and says, hey, dad, you remember that time you donated to a sperm bank? Well, I'm your kid. And I'd be like, I don't know how you can prove that. Do you have a bad knee? Yeah. Heart issue, crippling anxiety? Yeah, you're my kid. Great. You know, that's that's like none of that is anything I ever wanted to deal with in my life. So, but that is for how regulated so much of the medical field is. That
Mm.
sounds so insanely bizarre that it is that lax with everything.
It is insanely bizarre. And I agree with you. And I think there's a few reasons why. I think a lot of it is to do with shame. Being infertile has still that stigma about it, that it is a shameful thing that you should be ashamed of. So nobody talks about it. No one talks about it. This is something that everybody, even if something goes wrong, it's a shameful secret. And that sucks. That's stupid. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Struggling with infertility is something that is so insanely common. No one
Mhm,
should be ashamed of that. And that shame has allowed these doctors to sort of hide because they know you're not going to talk about it. They know you're not going to talk about it because if you start talking about it, then you have to admit that you struggled with infertility.
mhm,
That's not going to happen. Um, so whereas a lot of the medical industry has been like, "Oh shit, we have to like, enough things have come forward that we have to provide regulations." Very few things have come forward enough. So they've been able to sort of scoop by with the bare minimum and have been raking in so much fucking money. So much money with no repercussions.
mhm.
The thing that's actually called them out the most is Ancestry, 23andMe. Those DNA tests, they never saw coming. Those freaking things are what is currently bringing the infertility industry down. Hands
Wow.
down. It's why I tell everybody, go do it. Go take the test. I'm like, even if you know, because honestly, you don't know, but you even if you know you're not a donor conceived kid, still take it because you might be the answer to a donor conceived kid. You
Mhm,
might be able because your uncle could have donated. And now suddenly they're able to talk to them and get their medical history and find out how many years they're donating, what clinics they donated to, all these things they can have it. So I always encourage everybody. I'm like, no, 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 go do it because you trust me, you're helping and you could be also helping an adoptee out. Like, go do it. There's so many donor conceived kids, there's so many adoptees looking for their family, looking for some kind of answers to a medical history that what you could be providing actually could be life-saving.
mhm.
Um, so I always encourage everybody to do it, but yeah, no, the infertility industry did not see those 2 companies coming up, and
Yeah.
it's
Well
made waves.
and part of the thing that, probably doesn't help the fact is that regulations for fertility clinics isn't a sexy political cause that some politician's gonna take up. You know, like, you can go after the big banks, and you can go after this, and you can go after that. I'm going after infertility clinics.
It's not sexy, but it would be a very easy but here this is why I would, want any politician to kind of think about it is, 1, this is a very bipartisan issue.
Mhm,
This is not this is something it doesn't matter whether what you believe, you can get behind this very easily. This is common sense. Nobody's asking for something crazy here. This is very basic. Um, and it is something where if you are a newer politician, this can be a great front page thing of why haven't we talked about this? You could break ground and you are saving children's lives.
mhm.
literally saving children's lives. Not only are you saving donor conceived kids' lives, but you're also really helping out the donors who are, let's be honest, even though yes, they're 18, they're still freaking kids and they're being lied to and poached by infertility clinics. And this doesn't really go for sperm donors, but for egg donors, getting eggs out is a very complicated process that has a lot of side effects. You getting your eggs out can also cause infertility. It also ups your chance for cervical cancer. And somehow the clinics don't really like to warn them about that. They
Mhm.
don't like talking about those side effects, or they like saying, well, there's just not been enough research done on it. So, like, why even tell you the side effect?
Well,
Which is
and
like bullshit. Like, we know.
right, yeah. And when you think about it, even if I like attempt to play devil's advocate with it, and
Mhm.
even if some rival politician was taking that up as their cause and you had to find a way to oppose them, I don't see how anywhere you have an argument to make. Oh, it's fine the way it is. We've been jerking off in cups for 70 years now. I don't see why we change it now. And yeah, that's bizarre is the word I keep coming to.
No, any of like the only thing that most donor conceived kids are for that I understand why people have a massive hesitancy towards is 94% of donor now, well, I should say donor conceived kids, there's not been a lot of data taken on us, so all of these like sort of like polls that have been taken are very, very small. Because no one wants our reactions because if no one wants to hear from us. But a small poll that was taken, I believe it was like 700 donor conceived kids from We Are Donor Conceived were asked, do you think anonymity should be allowed? 94% of donor conceived kids saying no, anonymity should be banned.
Mhm.
That can get controversial, and I understand why that makes people uncomfortable. What I always tell people is we're actually behind with that one. Most first world nations banned anonymity because of the
Mhm.
amount of problems with it.
Yeah.
Um, and the reason that anonymity should be banned is not because the kid needs another mom, another dad. That's not the case in the least bit. There's no donor conceived kids who don't look at their parents who raised them as their parents. That's just not a thing. That's a huge misnomer. Um, reason that we need it is doctors have switched out their sperm for the donor sperm so many times, and they've been able to hide behind it because of the anonymity. Because if you don't know who the donor is, you can't double check things.
Right.
So it when you remove the anonymity, it makes it much harder for the doctors to do that. It makes it significantly harder for the doctors to lie about medical history or any kind of background history about the donors, which they do all the freaking time. They still do it to this day. Um, and it allows the donor conceived child to get up to date medical history. With most countries besides the United States, the anonymity goes away when the child is 18 and then they are handed the donor's contact information. That's how it works with most countries. They
Mhm.
have found that to be like, no, this is significantly safer because they've sort of been like, yep, too many children have died. Too many children have ended up being their doctor's children. Like, we can't trust anonymity anymore. Like, the infertility, you lost our trust with that. That is the one issue that I understand why that gives some people the heebie jeebies. I get it, but that is definitely something that the donor conceived kids are definitely fighting for. But I can, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we can put that one to the side, but can we at least get like verified medical history? Can we at least get a cap? Like, I'm willing to settle for this now, and I'll convince you of this later. We'll get there. We'll get there. Let's do this first.
Yeah, baby
I
steps.
accept that.
No
It's
pun
baby steps.
intended.
Exactly, and, like, I get it. I understand why that makes people uncomfortable, but I do think when you really look at the research and you talk to enough donor-conceived kids, you go, "Oh, I get it. Okay, this actually does make the most sense." But again, I understand why it makes people uncomfortable.
100%. So we are reaching the point where we are up against the clock. Where all can folks follow you at?
Um, the 2 best places to follow me, obviously, are TikTok. Please do that because that would be really nice. At Laura High Five. If you also follow me on Instagram, which is also at Laura High Five, and also on Twitter at Laura High Five. Instagram is definitely a big place where I post a lot of my shows. Same with Twitter, everything like that. And you'll see some cute pictures of my dog if you follow me on Instagram. I have a pug. She's adorable. But TikTok is definitely like my main source of like content. So if you just want to see like pretty much daily videos, that's where to go for me. You'll see me making a lot of jokes about about donor conception. I will actually be dropping a news story about the infertility industry tomorrow, which is a groundbreaking story. It is the hot off the press news. So please follow me to get that story firsthand.
Extra, extra. I love it.
I am not only going to be I'm going to be naming a very awful clinic. So it's going to be very exciting.
I'm gonna mark it on my calendar. This is great. Yes.
Yeah.
Smash it.
We're naming some names. Yeah. So I got some firsthand accounts, and it's like, basically in the text conversation with my contact, they said, I want to watch it burn down. And I was like, you gave me fuel, I'm lighting the match. And I was just like, no, we're bringing this people. We're bringing them down. It's time.
Mhm.
It's like, no. This we have the evidence. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. No reason not to.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Hey, any plans to come to the Midwest again anytime soon? I'm kind of upset that I heard you were in Aurora after I found out who you were. It's like, oh man, that would have been perfect.
Hopefully soon again. I mean, right now with the new variant, there's just not as many shows getting booked at the second, but I'm sure when it comes like March, I'm sure I'm going to be doing like intense road work again. So I'm sure it will happen. I've been begging my booker to actually get me booked in Milwaukee because I have a lot of followers in that area.
Oh, okay.
But I hope to go back to Chicago again because it was so wonderful. It really was. So hopefully soon. Just, I will go do stand up at that lady's house with the doilies. Like I'll do some stand up for them.
Oh, really? Do you like tea?
I love tea, and we'll spill the tea. It'll be great.
I'll see if I can get in touch with them. I think they pay $50. Is that?
I'm a cheap date. That's fine. You get me $50 and a pizza, like we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, that's what we'll do. We'll book that. I'll get in touch with them. Be like, hey, I know this gal. She does really great infertility and dick jokes. She's amazing, and they will hop on it. I'm sure.
I'm sure that sounds perfect for them.
Well, Laura, I absolutely cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. It's been an absolute delight. Cannot wait. I'm going to keep a close eye on your schedule and really hope to catch you live sometime because yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to bid you goodbye for now. I want to say thank you to everybody listening and or watching on YouTube. Check out Laura High. There's no way you will be disappointed. None whatsoever.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Unless you're a donor dad, in which case but comedy's all about feeling uncomfortable sometimes. So it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I know you were young, I know, but if you really thought that creating a child would have no consequences, I don't know what to tell you.
Right, you walked into that one, bud.
I'm sorry, man. Like I understand you were coerced, but like, maybe you shouldn't have gotten that Xbox.
Right? Yeah. I hope the $300 was worth it.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura. And yeah, hopefully we'll catch you again sometime.
Talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.